Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing part 13 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We've got plenty more of these to do, and we've got done plenty, and we've got plenty to do. So I'm really excited to get stuck into this one. We've got some very interesting animals for this one. So we're going to be starting with a couple flamingos. We have got the Andean flamingo. So these guys live in similar habitats as the James flamingo and the Chilean flamingo, which we'll see next. So this guy is a species of flamingo native to the Andes, hence the name Andean flamingo. And how you can tell it apart from other flamingos is that it has a deeper mandible and longer mandible, which is the jaw pretty much, and just generally just looks a little bit more pink compared to some of the other species, but it's still really cool. So these guys are filter feeders, so kind of like things like baleen. They have little bristles in their beaks that they used to be able to filter through the water to pick up any sort of foods that they feel like eating, really. So these guys will eat pretty much anything they'll get in their beaks. They can eat small algae to small fish and invertebrates, and even small plants as well as they get caught in their bristles. So they pretty much just eat what they can. And apparently with the Chilean and James flamingo, these guys kind of, since they live in the same habitat but the different species, there's some sort of niche partitioning there. So Chilean flamingos will use like a moderate to deep feeding depth where they'll go into deeper water and filter food through there, while these guys will adopt, well, the James flamingo will actually adopt a shallow one, and these guys are probably in between somewhere. It just hasn't been that well studied. So these guys are obviously native to the Andes, as I mentioned. They range from southern Peru to northwestern Argentina, and they are migratory and travel up to 700 miles in one day. And in summer they live on these salt lakes, and then they migrate to lower wetlands in the winter. The main reason of this is because it becomes extremely arid and salt flats, and also we don't know the path of the migrations, and yeah, these guys are cool. So these guys will breed in northern Chile, extreme southwestern Brazil, and northwestern Argentina. And during the non-breeding season, they remain in the wetlands where they bred, but often they move to lower elevations to feed and do things like that. So these guys are vulnerable. They're considered vulnerable because there's a lot of factors that affect their survival. There is a lot of mining that's in their habitats, and especially for dangerous compounds like borax, which is very toxic to these guys. It can cause skeletal malfunctions, cardiovascular diseases, and degradation of the testes, which means it's harder for them to produce sperm, which in turn means it's harder for them to create new individuals. So that sucks. And also there's issues of human disturbances, since they live in very specialized habitats with wetlands and salt flats. These can be very easily disturbed by people, so that means they'll lose their feeding grounds, which means there's less food to go around, which sucks. But there are conservation plans to protect these habitats and all that, so hopefully these guys don't get any more than vulnerable. Hopefully they don't become endangered, but it needs to make sure that these habitats, these very specific wetlands, because the world has lost like almost most of its wetlands. Wetlands are very important habitats for carbon sequestration, and also important for all these habitats for species like flamingos, birds, amphibians. A lot of other species rely on these wetlands, so they're very important to protect. So yeah, I really like these guys. We've got a cool Andean flamingo. Clearly having a good swim there. Next we'll be moving on to another close relative of this guy. We have got the Chilean flamingo, which clearly love to hang out in the water there. Good swimmers, aren't they? So you can see these guys are real pink all around, and I think these are cool. So the Andean flamingo is a species of large flamingo that gets about 110 to 130 centimeters tall, and is closely related to the American flamingo, which we covered, I believe, last video. So it's even considered the same species as well, and listed as near threatened, so that's like the one under least concern. So there are issues. So these guys are funny because they are much more pinker than the larger greater flamingo, but less so than the Caribbean flamingo. And there's some other small ways of telling them apart, but I don't feel like explaining that here just because there's too many big words. So these guys also, similar to the Andean flamingo, they use their beaks and the bristles inside their beaks, similar to how whales use baleen. and they use it to filter out small organisms, be that small fish and invertebrates, or algae or small plants, into their beaks to gobble up. So, in the wild, these guys live in large flocks and require crowded conditions to breed, similar to other flamingos. And during the breeding season, males and females display a variety of behaviors, including head flagging, which they swivel their head from a side-to-side motion, and wing salutes, where they repeatedly open and close their wings. And in the captivity, they kind of have a very poor record, even in environment as well. They have struggling to breed because of environmental conditions, and it will even delay reproduction until the conditions are favourable for breeding. And also, male and females cooperate by building a pillar-shaped mud nest, and both incubate the eggs laid by the female, and they take turns. And then when the baby is born, you can see here, a little bit big because these are based off greater flamingo and you can't change the size of the juveniles, but they have this very grey coloration. And then as they grow up and get more carotenoids from the food they eat, that's when they become this pink like the adults. So yeah, very, very cool animal, me likey. Me likey lot. Okay, so now we're going to move on to another bird. We've got lots of birds in these episodes, which is always awesome. So we have got the Vulturine guinea fowl now. So this is a cool guy. You can see where it gets its name from. It's got like a vulture-like head. So the Vulturine guinea fowl is the largest extant species of guinea fowl, and is only closely related to the white-breasted guinea fowl, which inhabits primary forests of Central Africa. So these guys are found in northeast Africa, from southern Ethiopia through Kenya to just northern Tanzania. So that's their main breeding range. These guys are large. They can get to about 61 to 71 centimeters long, and they have a big round body and this small head. They have longer wings and legs than other guinea fowl, so they're quite lanky in comparison. And the adults have these really cool blue face and black neck. And the reason they get the name Vulturine guinea fowl is because they have this naked neck that makes them look very much like a vulture. So these guys, the sexes are similar, though females may be slightly smaller, and the males will have larger tarsal spurs, which they kind of use to fight for mates. And young birds may be a grey-brown with a duller blue, and then you can see this wonderful blue that they get as they become adults. Pretty great. And these guys are gregarious, which means that they live in flocks outside of the breeding season. And usually these flocks are typically about 25 birds, and they feed on small seeds and invertebrates and kind of whatever they can fit their beaks in, will fit in their beaks. So these guys are also terrestrial, but always fly away when they're alarmed. And they breed in dry and open habitats and with scattered bushes and trees, such as savannas and grasslands. And they usually lay about 4 to 8 cream-coloured eggs, as well as in a well-hidden grassland scape, so they can make sure their eggs are hidden and protected from predators. So these guys are very cool looking. We can see that they're based off the baby cassowary. The issue is that very hard to change the sizes, so they're kind of the same size as the adults anyway, but I think that's cute. And now we have got another big bird. How can you not love big birds? We have got the emu. Big emu. So, for those of you who don't know, the emu is the second largest bird in the world, and second only to the ostrich. It is endemic to Australia, which means it can only be found there, and is the largest native bird of Australia, of course. So their range covers most of mainland Australia. There are extinct populations in Tasmania, Kangaroo Island, and King Island that were killed by the settlers who came around the late 1700s. Which sucks, of course, but emus have soft, feathered brown flightless birds. That's what they look like, and they have these long necks and legs that kind of dinosaur. Ooh, having a bit of a kerfuffle there. So they can reach up to 1.9 meters or 6'2" in height, and can travel great distances, and when necessary can sprint up to 50 kilometers an hour or 31 miles per hour. And they are very generalist in what plants they'll eat. They can eat whatever they can. They forage on a variety of plants. They're kind of one of the big herbivores of Australia, compared with kangaroos and wallabies and the extinct animals like the protodon. They were the big herbivores. And they also eat a lot of insects as well, and can go weeks without eating, surprisingly. And they also drink infrequently because they live in a desert, but they will take a lot of water in their bodies when it's available to them. So if they get a billabong, they're right into it. So for these guys, breeding takes place about May to June, and they the females fight instead of the males. So usually what will happen is, because the females are bigger, they'll fight for a male, and then a bunch of females will come lay their eggs to the male, and the male will take care of them. Since it's kind of reversed in ratites, similar with kiwis and ostriches, it's the male that takes care of the eggs, and the female kind of fights for the males and things like that. So it's reversed. And they'll lay a big clutch, and they'll lay several clutches for different males to protect. And they reach full size about 6 months after the eggs hatch, which is about 8 weeks. So they'll hatch after 6 weeks of incubation, and then about 6 months after hatching, they'll reach their adult sizes. And they can remain a family unit until the next breeding season. So they do like to hang out in small groups. Usually, if it's a group, there might be a father and his babies, or just a couple females and males hanging out. Just enjoy this thing. The reason these guys are also a very, very important cultural icon for Australia. It's like one of the animals you think of when you think Australia, along with kangaroos, emus, dingoes, things like that. And it's actually very prominent in Aboriginal mythology, so that's pretty cool. Let's have a look at the babies. So this is what an adult one looks like. You can see they have the blue there with the bald head. Really wonderful. And then you have the little babies with the stripes. Isn't that very, very cute? So these guys are very, very common in Australia, at least, and they're considered least concern. That means they are very low risk of extinction. And there are some populations that are considered endangered, such as the Tasmanian emu, which went extinct around the 1800s. That's extinct, obviously. And the threats to their survival these days are usually predation of their eggs, roadkills, and fragmentation of their habitats, which is a big issue for pretty much all species globally. So they're not really unique to them. But these guys are also farmed a lot for their eggs, also their meat and their feathers, which is used to make a bunch of different clothes and things. Even in New Zealand here, we have a bunch of emu farms. And they just actually kind of make good pets as well if you have the space for them, which is pretty cool. And I just love emus. Really a wonderful animal. So now let's move on to the next animal. We've got a mammal for a change, surprisingly. We have got the Impala. Let's have a look at you, big male. You look wonderful. So the Impala is a medium-sized antelope found in eastern and southern Africa, and was first described by German zoologist Heinrich Lichtenstein, forgive me for my German pronunciation, I'm not exactly German, in 1812. So two subspecies are recognized. There's the common impala, which is obviously common, and the larger and darker black-faced impala, which is kind of self-explanatory. These impala reach about 70 to 92 centimeters at the shoulder and weigh between 40 and 76 kilograms. They have this glossy reddish-brown coat that makes them look really nice, and the male's horns can reach between 45 and 92 centimeters long. So these guys are also active during the day, and they may be gregarious or territorial depending on the climate and geography. There's 3 distinct social groups that have been observed within impalas, kind of similar to elephants. There's usually the bachelor herds with the males hanging out together just doing their own thing. There's territorial males that go off and do their own thing because they're big and mean and no one wants to mess with them. And then there's the herds of females which take care of the young. So these guys are also known to leap very, very high, and is known for these leaps. And it's believed these leaps are there because it's an anti-predator strategy. So these guys will kind of do these charismatic leaps to avoid predators like cheetahs and lions and things like that, because the African savannah is full of big predators. And if you're a tasty gazelle, you've got to make sure to take care of yourself. So these guys are mainly browsers, as well as grazers, so they kind of eat both, but they're mainly browsers. They'll feed on monocots, dicots, acacia pods, frogs, and all sorts of fruits. And there's an annual 3-week rut that takes place during the end of the wet season, which is usually in May in their native range. And the rutting males will fight over dominance, so and the victorious males will get to the female and call the female that's an estrus or ready to procreate. Gestation in the species lasts about 6 to 7 months following a single calf that is born and immediately concealed in cover. So then from that, the calves are suckled for 4 to 6 months, and young males, when they're forced out, when they've grown out and kind of overstayed their welcome, they'll either go out and mainly go and join bachelor herds, while the females stay back and kind of just chillax. So these impala are found in woodlands and sometimes on the interface, which is kind of like the mixture area with between woodlands and savannas, and they usually inhabit places near water, while the black-faced impala, the subspecies of black-faced impala, usually is confined to southwestern Angola and Chilean in northwestern Namibia. The common impala is usually widespread across its range and has actually been reintroduced into Gabon in southern Africa. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature classifies this species as least concern, so not too many issues worrying about it, though the blackface subspecies have been classified as vulnerable, with fewer than 1,000 individuals remaining in the wild since 2008. So while it's a subspecies, it should still be protected. There's a big issue of conservation. Sometimes subspecies kind of just get left. But there seems to be the species as a whole is doing well. So also issues like poaching that affects other African animals. Poaching and habitat loss is obviously going to affect these guys as well. And I think they look cool. You're a bit banged up, but you look cool. A really cool antelope to have in the game, and one of the most famous, I think. Think of impalas. Wonderful animal. Let's have a look at the baby. Let's have a look at the baby. Look at you, you're so cute, having a good sleep. So now we've got another really cool animal I like. We have got the Saola. Look at the Saola. So the Saola, it was also called the Asian unicorn, or the Vulturine bovid, is one of the rarest large mammals in the world, and it's a forest-dwelling bovid only found in the Annamite ranges of Vietnam and Laos. And this guy was only described following the remains of this animal found in 1992, and the first described the first time we caught these guys on photo with a photo was 1999 on a camera trap. So this species is very, very hard to find in its native range. A very, very secretive species. In fact, I believe the only time we had one in captivity and really got to study it was in 1998. So remember, this species is only about 30 years old described, so it's a big animal too. And it's really, really interesting to think about. Like, I know a lot of cryptid people are really into this guy, and I'm into this guy too. I love it. So, yeah, these guys were first described in May 1992, and where they were first found, where they found remains of this guy, especially these strange horns, and that's where they got the name the Saola. And these guys, there was actually a recent sequencing of ribosomal mitochondrial DNA. That's big. So that shows that these guys are kind of a really, really basal group of bovids, which really tells a lot about their evolution as well. They're kind of like a really early relative of other bovids, like cows and antelopes and all these guys, which is pretty cool. So in 1998, they measured a female named Martha. We all know Martha from Batman vs Superman. So this animal was observed for 15 days and was died for whatever reasons. They measured the animal. It was about 84 centimeters at the shoulder, and the back was slightly elevated, nearly 12 centimeters taller than the shoulder here. So you can see it's got like a big rounded back. The head to body ratio or length was about 150 centimeters taller than the shoulder height. Oh, no, I didn't read that wrong. But I was reading that the back was 12 centimeters taller than the shoulder, so the whole body was 150 centimeters long. And the general characteristics of this guy, as you can see, it's got like a chocolate brown, a really nice looking coat with these patches of white fur on its face, throat, and the sides of the neck, and a paler shade of brown near the neck and belly, and a black dorsal stripe, and nearly parallel horns, which is of both sexes. So the reason it's kind of got the name Asian unicorn, if you look at it from the side, let's see a good angle, it looks like it's almost got one horn. So look, keep your head straight. Come on, do it for me. If you look at it at the side, so look, it looks like it's just got one horn. It's pretty cool. So yeah, these guys are just awesome. So as I mentioned, these guys live in deciduous and evergreen forests of East and Southeast Asia, and they like river valleys. They only live in the Annamite ranges, and that's why they're considered critically endangered. The range appears to cover approximately 5,000 square kilometers, including 4 nature reserves, so that's good. And they tend to migrate during the winter down to the lowlands. And these guys are just so young, we have no idea about their reproduction. It's believed that they have a fixed mating season from late August to mid-November, where single calves have been documented, mainly during mid-April to June. And in absence of more specific data, their gestation period is estimated to be similar to those of Tropalagus species, like kind of like bongos and such. And there have been 3 reports of Saola killings from nearby villages, including young accompanying their mothers. One possessed a 9.5 centimeter long horn, while the other estimated 15, and the third 18 centimeters. So these varying horn lengths suggest the birth season extending over at least 2 to 3 months. So they have that 3 months there where they're kind of growing up and breeding. So these guys are also considered critically endangered because it has a very restricted habitat, which is very, very susceptible to habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. And also there's a lot of illegal trade of bushmeats and traditional medicines over that area. As you guys know, that's a big thing in Asia. So they get caught in snares that are meant for animals like wild boar, sambar, and muzjak, and so that puts them at risk. They also seem to be very, very sensitive to human disturbance, and clearly like to be very secretive. We pretty much also know nothing about them, so that's why they're considered critically endangered. But I really hope that we get to see more of these guys in the future, and I hope they don't go extinct, because I love the Saola. The Saola is just such a cool animal. It's like almost proving that there's so many things that we think we know, but we don't. There's things hidden in certain areas. Not to say that Bigfoot exists, because I definitely don't believe Bigfoot exists, but it really shows that as humanity, we've got a lot to learn and a lot to find. There's still adventure out there if you are into it, you know? I just think that's awesome. And now we've got another animal. We're going back to the big carnivores now. We have got the coyote. So, hello. Look at those cute puppies. They're adorable. So this is a coyote. So they're a species of canine native to North America. It is smaller than the closest relative, the wolf, and slightly smaller than the eastern and red wolf. So in the context of the American environment, it's very similar to golden jackals of Eurasia, and they're even often called the African jackal by some ecologists, which is pretty cool. They're also known as the prairie wolf or the brush wolf. So this species is listed as least concern because it's very widely distributed across North America. And coyote populations are abundant southwards through Mexico and Central America. This species is very versatile and is able to adapt to a lot of different environments, especially environments modified by humans. That's how they've been able to expand their range from western United States to eastern United States through people clearing habitat for them, kind of clearing open areas and such. So technically, if coyotes on the eastern United States, also by clearing wolves as well, are invasive because they have cleared a lot of the animals, cleared a lot of the land and a lot of the wolves, which is direct competition for these guys, and they control coyote numbers. So that's why they've kind of spread that way, and they're doing quite well under human influence, believe it or not. So that's why they're enlarging their range through eastern US and Canada. And the first sighting of eastern Panama was about 2013 of a coyote, so that's pretty cool. So the average male coyote weighs about 8 to 20 kilograms, and the average female 7 to 18. They have this very beautiful coat that's like usually a light grey to a red, even intersected with black and white, so that's pretty cool. And it varies a lot during geography and such, just because they have such a wide range. They are highly flexible in the social organizations as well. They either live in family units or an loosely knit pack of underrated individuals. And even though they're primarily carnivorous, they kind of just eat whatever they can. They feed mainly on deer, rabbits, hares, rodents, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and vertebrates. But they may also eat some fruit and vegetables on occasion. So these guys clearly do like their veggies. And they have this charismatic howl that's pretty cool. And humans are the greatest threat to coyotes, followed by cougars and grey wolves, considering that we got rid of most of those. And we are kind of the main predator now, especially in places where hunting is a very prevalent thing, places like Texas. Obviously, I've heard stories of, like, if a coyote called in the middle of the night, it would be dead the next morning, which is kind of morbid to think about. But yeah, that's just how it is. They're doing okay, at least, so it's not too much of an issue. So, in spite of this, they do mate with grey wolves, and they create the coy wolves, and it's believed that red wolves and eastern wolves are populations that have descended from extensive hybridization between coyotes and grey wolves, especially red wolves. It's a very complicated taxonomic thing, which I find very, very interesting. Let's have a look at the big male here, he's cool. And it shows also that pretty much all grey wolves across the United States, most grey wolves, contain some level of coyote DNA, mainly just because it helps them acclimatize. Sometimes a lot of species will hybridize if they move into a new place. Like, even humans have done it. Humans have Neanderthal DNA, we have Denisovan DNA, we have DNA from 2 other unknown human species, or they could be already described, like maybe even Homo erectus DNA, in our systems. And it's actually helped us a lot to acclimatize to different temperatures, different climates across the planet. So a very similar thing happening to these wolves here. Also in elephants we see it a lot. These mammoths and mammoth species interbreeding along with Paleoxodon, Loxodons, all sorts of interbreeding going on there, which is pretty cool. So that's why the concept of a species is very hard to figure out, but I think these guys are wonderful and very cute. So these guys are also a prominent character in Native American folklore, and they're described as like tricksters and ultimately alternate between the form of a coyote and a man. And I think that kind of fits their personality well from what I've seen of coyotes. They have a very interesting personality. This animal is also especially respected in Mesoamerican cosmology as a symbol of military might. And after the European colonization of the Americas, it's usually seen as a cowardly and untrustworthy animal, which doesn't really help with the conservation of the species, because obviously if you see an animal's untrustworthy and dangerous, you don't really want to conserve it, you want it out of there. But unlike wolves, they haven't really gone through an improvement of this image, and they have sadly a lot of people have a very negative opinion of coyotes. A lot of people love wolves, and they used to be demonized, but they're not quite as much demonized anymore, even though there's still a lot of people that do demonize wolves. These guys don't have that revolution yet, which is very sucky, but I think these guys are wonderful the way they are, but at least they're not endangered, they're doing well. So now we're moving into the cats now. We have got a Jaguarundi, so very, very cool animal. You look a bit mangled. So Jaguarundi is a wild cat native to the Americas. Their range extends from central Argentina into the south and northern Mexico, through Central and South America east of the Andes. So the Jaguarundi, however you pronounce it, Jaguarundi, is a medium-sized cat of a slender build. You can see that here, very, very slender. They come in 2 unique morphs. There's like a grey morph and a red morph. And they have this elongated body with relatively short legs, a small narrow head, and round ears, a short snout, and a long tail. And they look vaguely like mustelids in that sense. They're also pretty big. They're about twice as large as a domestic cat, and they reach nearly 14 inches at the shoulder, or 360 millimeters, or 36 centimeters, probably about that, and weigh between 3.5 and 7 kilograms. So these guys are very secretive and alert. The Jaguarundi is typically solitary or formed pairs in the wild, though captive individuals are more gregarious, which means they're more used to each other, but because they're in captivity and don't really need to compete for resources. Unlike other cats, such as ocelots that they live with, these guys are also more active during the day and hunt mainly during the daytime or evening hours, versus other animals like ocelots, so jaguars, that tend to hunt during the night. So individuals live in large home ranges as well and are very sparsely populated through the regions. So the Jaguarundi is also an effective climber, but typically prefers hunting on the ground. And they feed on various kinds of animals, including ground-feeding birds, reptiles, rodents, and other small mammals. So they have a very generalist diet, which is good. Also, mating occurs throughout the year, with peaks at different times during the range, because they have such a huge range. Different climates and stuff can vary, especially if you're like near the equator, and then you go from basically wet to dry season, then you go up past the equator into basically autumn, winter, summer, spring. So it varies a lot during their range. So after about a gestation period of 70 to 75 days, a litter of 1 to 4 cubs is born. You can see they're very cute here. Even her mum stepping on it. And these guys live to about 15 years in captivity, but they're likely in the wild. They don't live quite as long, since obviously living in the wild can be a bit harder on you. But these guys inhabit a broad range of habitats, closed as well as open habitats, ranging from tropical rainforests, deciduous forests, to deserts, to thorn scrubs. So they're very, very wide-ranging species, live in all sorts of different habitats. They're also fairly common in Brazil, Peru, and Venezuela, but may be locally extinct in the United States, similar to jaguars, since a lot of these big carnivores were prosecuted for hunting livestock. So you'd see that with wolves, and you see that with jaguars, you see it with even other species like bison that were hunted nearly to extinction as kind of a way to get rid of the Native Americans, which is very, very sad, but now we're kind of reversing that. We're going to get more bison, we're getting more of these guys. There's been talks, I believe, of jaguars coming back to the US, which is pretty awesome. But these guys luckily are still listed as least concern. That means there's not very many issues that plague them, but along with a variety of other species and other issues, populations are maybe in decline because of habitat loss and fragmentation and their prosecution for killing poultry. So that sucks. But they are very, very cool animals. And look at these cute little babies running towards them. Isn't that adorable? Let's have a look. Look at that. He go, go, go. Very cute. So now, last but not very much not least, we have got a very cool animal. It's not a species, but it's a population. We have got the Asian lion, or the Asiatic lion. So these guys are a population of Panthera leo leo, since there's 2 lion subspecies. There's Panthera leo leo, which lived across Asia and Northern Africa. And then you have the South African subspecies, which is Panthera leo melicudata or something like that. That's how we pronounce it. But these guys are the only population living in India today. The rest... So these guys are obviously very restricted in their range. Since the turn of the 20th century, the range has been restricted to the Gir National Park and the surrounding areas of the Indian state of Gujarat. And historically, they used to live through northern India to the Middle East and Western Asia. So they used to have obviously a much bigger range, but now quite a bit smaller. So this population has been steadily increasing since 2010, so that's very good. In May 15, the consensus was over an area about 20,000 square kilometres. The population was estimated at 523 individuals. And to compare that to June of 2020, the estimated population consists of 674 Asiatic lions in the Gir forest, an increase of 29% over the 2015 consensus. So these guys are actually close relatives. They're the same subspecies as the Barbary lion, and Barbary lions are very famous for having these huge manes. And this this shows how different populations can be just based on the areas that live in. They don't have a large mane as even African lions. They have a very skinny mane, but I think they still look beautiful. Very interesting animals. So they are, obviously, as I mentioned, genetically closer to North and West African lions. And these guys converged with, the 2 subspecies diverged about 186 to 128,000 years ago. And it's thought these lions remain connected through North and Central the North and Central African lions. These guys would have been connected and still be able to breed freely with each other until they were interrupted by the extinction of lions in Western Eurasia and also in Europe. There was lions in Europe. You hear of Greece there were lions in Greece. You can hear stories like the Bohemian lion from Hercules. We have evidence. That was about the 5th century. And these guys kind of went extinct through the Holocene, through that area, and really, that's where they only got stuck in Africa and Asia now, and India. So, unlike African lions, as I mentioned, they have smaller manes, but these guys still get quite big. The males have a shoulder height of 107 to 120 centimeters, and females 80 to 107. There were 2 lions in the Gir forest measured from 1.98 meters from head to body, with a 1.79 to 1.8 centimeter long tail, with a total length of about 2.82 to 2.87 meters, almost about 3 meters long, from the tip of the snout to the tip of the tail. The Gir lions are central in size to Central African lions, but smaller than large African lions. Adult males weigh between 160 and 190 kilograms, while females weigh between 110 and 120. So these guys don't have these big impressive manes as most African lions do, but it seems that they get along fine without it. These manes of most lions in ancient Greece were also less developed, so this may be a regional population thing. So if you compare these guys to the European lions that used to live during ancient Greek times, they would have these very, very reduced manes compared to African lions, but still look beautiful, I would say. Look at that beautiful guy. Let's have a look at the female while we're talking. Here we are. Queen. So this is, there's a big story about these guys as well. So these guys, again, only live in the Gir forest, which is a declared sanctuary for these guys in 1965. And they're the only habitats in India today supporting Asiatic lions, where there's no hunting and no human activity allowed. And only certain groups are able to use livestock and put livestock through the land to graze. So these lions are very restricted to this reserve, and we recovered from the extinction. There was approximately 105 lions that lived outside the Gir forest and represented a quarter of the entire lion population. So these dispersing subadults established new territories outside their natal pride, so this is kind of the area they're living in. They still live in Jaguarundi, and by 2015 the population has been considered about 523 individuals in an area about 7,000 kilometers squared in that region. And by 2020, there was big issues. There's at least 6 satellite populations that spread through the 8 districts of Jaguarundi, including human-dominated areas, which is very, very bad, and I'll get to that soon. And then these guys were all over Arabia, Mesopotamia, they just lived everywhere. They became extinct around the 10th century in areas like that, in the Caucasus Mountains, in Arabia and Palestine. And until the middle of the 19th century, they used to live in Mesopotamia and Syria until the 1870s. By the late 19th century, they were extinct in Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and the last known Iraq lion was killed in 1918. And the issue with these guys is, as they mentioned, obviously they live in these habitats and they do similar things lions do. They hunt lots of deer, sambar, wild boar, and ngali, and they go around marking these territories, and they kind of feed whatever they can. The big issue is also livestock. They'll eat domestic water buffalo, wild boar, cattle, and they most commonly kill Charlie, but that's also a big issue. And also prey on dormitory camels, really. And they generally kill most prey 100 meters from any water source and change prey of class range and drag carcasses into dense cover. And during hot months, they've been known to prey on mugger crocodiles during drier seasons. So the threat to these guys are only one single population, and they only live in one area, which is the Gir forest and areas in Jaguarundi. So the issue of these guys, there's been issues of poaching, large fires, and there's huge risks of an epidemic, similar to, obviously, the one that we're facing now, that could really affect the population of lions, since they only live in this one area. And there's also starting to be an issue as the populations grow. The Jaguarundi forest can't support 700 lions, so the issue is they're dispersing naturally, as they would do before humans came and destroyed most of their habitat. And the problem is, now they're dispersing by themselves, they're moving into areas with people and eating their livestock, and that causes issues, obviously, with people, which means dead lions. and dead cattle, which is not fun. So there have been big efforts to try and take lions out of Gujarat and introduce them into areas where they used to live, have a more spread out population. This is good for conservation management. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to start populations in different areas of India, so in case one population had an outbreak, they would be fine. But the issue is not the lions. There's 700 lions. So you can take a 50 and put them in 3 different populations. You still have dozens of lions. It'd be fine. You have enough for a very, very healthy population to be spread around. More has been done with less. So for example, the founding population of Kakapo is about 40, and now we have 210. So I think you can do a lot with less. We've done it before. But the issue is, Gujarat does not want their lions out. They take pride in being the only place that has lions in India. And that may be good for national pride, yes, but it's not good for the conservation of these animals. Putting your eggs in one basket is never a good thing. And these guys are just going to keep breeding and breeding and breeding. We're getting more lions, which means they're naturally spread out by themselves. These guys need a large area to sustain themselves. So the issue is, these guys are spreading out by themselves, getting into conflict. And if we manage to translocate them into different areas of India, that would be very helpful because we can do it controlled. We can introduce them into areas, large areas, where there are little issue of people and poachers. So, versus them kind of just spreading to themselves, having to navigate human landscapes and potentially at big risk of being killed by ranchers. But for whatever reason, Gujarat, our government, is like, no, we just want these lions. We take pride with the only one that wants these lions. And that has been a big issue for conservation because obviously that nationalist pride of that state, but we want more lions everywhere. And it's just going to cause more conflict because these lions are going to naturally disperse anyway as their populations grow, so we need places to put these lions. And them moving into people's lands and habitats, human habitat, is not going to be good for them. Now, this was a similar issue with cheetahs in Iran. There's only about 50 or so cheetahs in Iran, and there actually been talks of India introducing African cheetahs into there, and you think it's kind of a very point of national pride for them to have these big cats. But because they want to be the only one that has a species, that just impedes the conservation because you don't want to put your eggs in one basket. You want to spread these out and have as much habitat for these guys as possible, but clearly these guys don't see it that way. So there have been dozens of attempts trying to get these guys, these Asiatic lions, into different reserves, but the government always shuts us down. But if you guys really want to get involved, you should voice. If you guys live in India, if you guys want to help out with conservation of these guys, be vocal. This event depends a lot on the governments of the area who want to petition it. And if enough people say, we want these lions, we want to move some lions over here, we want to move them over there, you need to be vocal and you need to fight for it. And that's for the health of the lions and the health of the ecosystem these lions live in, because what's going to happen is the lions in Gujarat are only going to breed and breed and breed, and there's not going to be not enough space for 1,000 lions, and then they're going to disperse into human habitats and get themselves killed. And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. So we need to make sure that these lions can find some healthy places to live. So, yeah, I think that was enough lecturing. But I just think that's something really important, especially for politics. It's something that is obviously very politically driven because the government kind of prides itself being the only place in India with lions. But that doesn't help the lions. It only just kind of builds the nation's ego, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just bad for the lions. We want lions outside. We want more lions everywhere, not just in Gujarat. You know what I mean? We want them all over India and Asia again, because these guys used to live all around that way. But yeah, I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to click the little bell icon in the corner there to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. You guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.